Hello and welcome to this Adastra podcast. My name's Mark Cahoot and I lead the governance practice for North America for Adastra, a global data, AI, and cloud systems integrator. We're coming to you today from Atlanta at the occasion of FabCon 2026, and joining me today is John Steffey, Senior Director of Enterprise Software and Analytics at Tolmar. Tolmar is a pharmaceutical company recognized internationally for advanced, long-lasting injectable drug delivery capabilities. Tolmar has produced 22 marketed products across urology, oncology, and endocrinology, helping patients better manage conditions like central precocious puberty, advanced prostate cancer, and testosterone replacement. At its heart, Tolmar believes in being a strong ally to its partners, most importantly to the patients and provider communities it serves. With more products forthcoming, Tolmar is laser-focused on future growth, and with it, John focuses on the data enablement and that powers new products and business areas. John, a warm welcome to the Adastra podcast, and thank you for joining us today in the studio.
Thanks, Mark. Look forward to the conversation.
Terrific. Let's start with you, just to turn that laser focus there for the beginning. Can you share a little bit about your background, please, John, and what drew you to the intersection of data and analytics in pharma?
I think I started out as a nerd. That's probably the thing that first took me to this. So my first nerdy love was baseball statistics.
Right.
Right. And I spent...
an eye for detail.
Pardon?
An eye for detail.
Yes. Part of my childhood. In fact, fantasy football very popular these days, right? I may age myself here a little bit, but before this was looking at the newspaper weekly and copying statistics into a spreadsheet and all that. And I think that's kind of stuck with me. So I varied, my education for some time. I went to a little liberal arts school, ended up with a degree in English, took a degree in education, taught high school for some time, but my kind of inner geek was always there. So over the course of the last 30 years, then I've took turned in a handful of different places. A startup that did web application development for some time was kind of my turn back towards the inner geek. I worked for some time at a engineering publishing company, and then a spin-off that did supply chain management. And so that's really where I kind of steered towards high-tech manufacturing, supply chain type stuff. And that's really been... Since then, my kind of focus is what can I do to use, data and whatever the most appropriate emerging technologies would be to kind of accelerate, especially kind of quality around high-tech manufacturing. Mm-hmm. So spent some time in aerospace industry, built a program for medical devices, and then for the last couple of years have been in pharma.
I'm just curious, what are the commonalities across aerospace, medical devices, and pharmas? What would you say links the two? I think it's a lot of focus on the shop floor and quality by the sounds of it. What's the nature of the business?
I think for each of those industries, you have to have the right process control around the manufacturing, and even everything adjacent to the manufacturing, because the cost of quality, right? Yeah. If it's a jet engine on an airplane, none of us want that jet engine on the airplane to go bad. So you have to, really pay little extra attention to all the kind of details of the manufacturing process, that type of thing. Not just the original manufacturer, but throughout the supply chain as well, right? So medical devices similarly, right? Whether it's a artificial knee that someone's getting, or at my previous company, we made apheresis devices and bioreactors, among other things. Those types of things where you can't have the one product go bad, right? So if we're manufacturing a coffee mug and it goes bad, that's okay, as long as you don't make lots and lots of bad ones. But you can't make one bad jet engine or one bad bioreactor. In pharma, in a sense, is the same thing. If you don't have the right process controls around that, the medicine that goes into our body, you can't have that not work correctly. And so that's kind of, I think, in many ways, the common thread. Data ends up being the foundation to have those effective process controls. At least kind of that's what I've learned over the years.
And I think it's also interesting how that relates to data itself, process controls in its delivery and its unification and in extracting value from it. So exactly. I see that link there as well between the industry you're in and the areas that you work in with data and analytics. Yeah. And John, tell me, I'd like to turn to Tolmar now, and I'm curious, what's unique about your approach to enterprise software and analytics, perhaps compared to other pharma companies, given where Tolmar is in its growth path, life cycle, et cetera?
I don't know, Mark, if this is unique necessarily, but one of the things that maybe drew me to Tolmar was, over the last several years, Tolmar put a lot of energy and investment into digitizing what had been non-digital kind of processes before. For quite some time, lots of maturity around manufacturing, but maybe not sustainable maturity because we hadn't invested in digitizing a lot of our processes. And today, or at least since I've joined, one of the things that attracted me was we can use data, we can use modern data platforms, we can use AI to catch up and maybe accelerate or leapfrog or accelerate beyond our peers. And I think that's maybe not, again, unique, but especially for a mid-size enterprise like Tolmar that's really kind of grown through mergers and acquisitions, has had its product portfolio evolve and so on. That becomes something we want to really lean into, I think, to kind of continue growing. Digitization
and bringing all that together to be able to accelerate and leapfrog. Interesting. Yeah. I think many pharma companies struggle with the modernization of legacy systems that they've built over decades. Tell me a little bit about your journey or your approach to modernizing, and I'm curious what you think the keys are to a successful modernization journey. What does good look like when you're moving from that legacy state to enabling new capabilities, optimizing the manufacturing processes, et cetera?
I think you have to get some of the fundamentals right. I mean, would be one of the things. So I think good, in a sense, good looks like was I thoughtful about the ingestion patterns? Was I thoughtful about how I transform data? Did I get governance, right early in the process? I think sometimes companies might lean too much in towards that one particular killer use case or something like that, and skip maybe some of the fundamentals. And we frankly struggled with that a little bit. The partnership with Ad Astra actually helped us maybe course correct early in some of our modernization efforts and building a platform.
You're talking about the stuff outside the core technical work, it sounds to me like, or adjacent to the core technical work. It sounds like the company changing. It sounds like ways of working with the data changing.
It's a cliche, but that kind of organizational change management, portion of it in some ways is the hard bit, right?
Right.
People smarter than I am have already solved most, if not all, of the technology challenges for something like this, standing up a modern cloud data platform and so on.
Almost like that's not the hard part.
It's really not the hard part, right? I mean, I think the hard part is understanding, like, how am I going to get my users with me 6 months hence, right? That type of thing. And so I think a lot of it really is, being in with them on what type of problems we're trying to solve, right? Not just today, but what type of problems we foresee wanting to solve in 18, 36 months.
I feel like that truly expands the role of someone who is focused on enterprise software, right? It's the role has its technical aspects, but again, the OCM side of it, and what's the impact on the broader organization?
I think in roles like mine or any kind of technology leadership role in an organization, it's more about understanding the business actually than understanding the technology. And I think I'm not writing Python notebooks, right? But I'm spending a lot of time with other leaders in the organization, making sure I understand their business problems.
What's important
to them. Making sure the choices we make about technology investments are aligned with that 3 to 5 year roadmap or whatever the company's strategy is beyond not just this particular use case. And I think that's really what I try to spend a lot of my real think time on is that, not on, again, the Python notebook someone else has solved.
That sounds like visioning the future in many ways, or working with
together with other leaders. I think certainly you don't want to have technology drive the business, right? I'm excited, as I suspect many of our viewers are, about opportunities with agentic AI and so on. But you can't lead with the technology. You have to, kind of lead with the business problem.
And I suppose technology so it takes on the role of enabler in that case.
Exactly.
You mentioned earlier, John, Microsoft Fabric. So it sounds to me as though you put into place a unified data platform kind of thing. Were you facing problems in your post-M&A place with data fragmentation? Was that something that have you enabled new capabilities by reducing data fragmentation and unification?
That was, in many ways, kind of one of our core objectives for the platform stand-up, right? So when I joined Tolmar, before we built this platform, we had good discrete reporting kind of silos, right? So our, manufacturing people had some of their data in one system, and we have our ERP system, lab information management system, but the systems really weren't talking to one another terribly well. So if, for instance, we had to think of opportunities for improvements in cycle time in certain parts of the manufacturing processes, the decision makers would have to go into 4 or 5 separate different places and then collate report data from multiple different source systems and so on. So obviously, really that kind of federating the data, and I think that's a pretty common kind of first step is so that we have kind of a unified view on end-to-end different processes, and that's really the principle we approached a lot of this with.
And John, you were mentioning a unified data platform. Data fragmentation and data in silos are common challenges, right? We see that through the legacy of how systems have been deployed, et cetera. And that must change when you put a data platform in place. In your experience, what really changes in the culture, the way of working, or what gets catalyzed when you put in a unified data platform?
I think, Mark, we're all getting hit with so much data all the time.
Overloaded.
Right? So, I mean, everything in our lives, right? You pull up your phone and you can't keep up with whatever your social media feed is or the news or that. And leaders in an org are feeling the same way all the time, right? So,
and you can't not kind of thing. You can't not look at these things as they come up on your phone.
Right. And so I think, that kind of federating, structuring, adding an ontology around the data helps reduce, I think, the complexity.
You're putting structure around it.
Yeah, and therefore makes the decisioning more empirically driven, right? Rather than there's so much that I almost feel like I have to have a gut reaction to something.
And you don't. Maybe in some places.
Right. And I think the data platform, right, puts that structure around that so that I can be more thoughtful about how I'm making decisions about what the decisions are.
So it sounds like you're moving from a state of overload, doubt, and paralysis to empirically based decisions. Yeah. That must be a huge catalyst to action, I would suspect.
Yeah, that paralysis and doubt, I think, is a good way to do it, right? Because you're reducing the uncertainty and of because you had formerly all those disparate data silos and those types of things. The structure helps reduce the uncertainty about the data, which then makes the decisioning process have more certainty.
That more certain, indeed. Yes. But I'm thinking about this now in the context back to regulated industries, right? And I'm thinking about the balance between speed and innovation with governance, really, for compliance, seniority, risk controls, and trust, which has got to be especially important for regulated industries like pharmaceuticals, whose decisions intimately affect people's lives. How do you find that balance between control and driving forward with innovation?
Yeah, you said it a little bit. It's risk. In fact, one of my early learnings, first from the aerospace industry and then in medical devices, if you look at the regulations, they do effectively say that the manufacturers should make some of those judgments based on product impact, right? So, if this is a cancer drug that's going into our bodies, right, then you need to cross the T's 5 times. And if it's a AI-developed cancer drug that's going into our bodies, right, then you maybe want to cross the T a 6th or 7th or 9th time. if you're thinking about where a button goes on screen, right, or the color of the proceed button on screen, and there's little product impact, there's little risk to a patient.
Perhaps not so much of a big deal.
Right. You then for something like that, I think you release at a sprintly cadence, and every 2 weeks you can do an update. Or we see on our telephone, there's an update to many of our apps, on the weekly. It's why you do see longer product development life cycles in something like pharma or medical devices or aerospace, right? Because you do have to, for certain types of use cases, you have to cross the T that fifth or seventh time, I think. But it also, I think, what I've tried to help folks at Tolmar understand, and in each of my employers, is recognizing that kind of that risk profile should affect what type of controls we have around our software development life cycle in this case, or whatever our kind of product development life cycle is.
Gotcha.
I think that's really key.
So you're taking a risk-based approach, and you're looking at the impacts of individual use cases, and I guess you're investing proportionately depending on that. It sounds like the pharma company actually becomes a risk management function in many ways beyond manufacturing.
Yeah, I think that's what you're doing as leaders, is like trying to balance, right? How fast can we go on bringing a new idea to fruition versus how can I do that in a way that's gonna kind of safe for whatever my intended outcomes are.
I've got 2 letters for you now that we've talked about: data, A and I. Do you see AI, John, profoundly reshaping the pharma business in particular over the near and midterm? And which areas where do you think we'll see the biggest transformation of the business model?
Well, I think we're already seeing it, obviously, in the pharma space with development, right? Research and development type opportunities, right? Where you're, maybe doing molecule combinations or recombinations at a faster pace. If we have digital twins to do some of the product development, those types of things. I think in almost all industries, we are going to see, AI generally as a productivity enhancement, right? Our machine assistants can do certain type of tasks faster than humans can, and we all know, even at this point, where there's going to be certain types of judgments that we don't necessarily want to trust the machine with, that we want to kind of reserve for the human. So I think, like any industry, I don't think pharma is unique, that we're going to see, once we learn how to have the right balance there and use these tools to really accelerate for that. At Tolmar, we've been excited about a whole bunch of different opportunities, whether it's re-envisioning, not just automating, but re-envisioning some of our workflows. Right, that's one of the opportunities we're getting into now. I think there's the general kind of productivity enhancement use case we've seen, and then as I mentioned, product development's another place where I think it's going to be really important.
This seems to be the thin red line running through many of these conversations around FabCon and about playing nice with robots and workforce transformations. Indeed.
This morning, I did a session hosted a session for our commercial and sales teams about where AI kind of fits into their individual and collective toolboxes, and I think that's kind of one of the things people are really leaning into is how does this. It fits into this isn't going to necessarily. I mean, if we learn to use the technology effectively, it's not going to make individual tasks or jobs go away, but if we can use the technology effectively, it's going to really raise the value, right? Profile.
Right, and refocus on different tasks.
Yeah.
Well, the potential is great. As we come to a close, John, because we're out of time, I'd like you to turn back to where we started and ask you for a few nuggets. What's one key lesson about data and analytics that you would tell your earlier self at the beginning of your journey, and in fact, that you think would be interesting for decision makers driving enterprise data enablement today?
Yeah, I don't know, Mark, if it's explicitly about data and analytics, but for me, one of the reasons I love this work, right, is because there's always so much new to learn, type thing. And I think, for me, the lesson has been lean into that kind of natural curiosity, the continuous learning mindset. And I would say this goes for almost any white collar knowledge worker type role, where if I get stuck and I'm only doing the things that I'm learning now, not only am I maybe missing an opportunity or going to get behind, but I think I close myself off to the world a little bit. And so it's not just when I'm thinking about data and analytics, but it's just everything. It's a continuous learning mindset. I want to be open to new experiences. It helps you appreciate where you are in the moment as well, I think.
It sounds like it's hard to do sometimes, given the whiplash pace of change, the overwhelmingness that we were talking about the overload. But I think that you're right. I think that just maintain that mindset, whether it's in your work life or your personal life, is something that will serve you well in your work life, frankly.
Well said. Well said.
John, thank you for the very insightful and interesting and broad-ranging conversation. I'm taking a lot of away in terms of transformation, how technology has its place, but it's really an enabler and a catalyst for other things. So thank you very much for taking the time and joining us today.
I enjoyed talking with you, Mark.
Thanks, John.
Thanks.
And to our audience, thank you as well for joining us today. If you found today's discussion interesting, please be sure to like and subscribe to the Cadastra podcast series for more insights in data, AI, and partner-led innovation. Until next time, thank you for joining us, and so long for now from FabCon 2026 in Atlanta.